Hi everybody, it's Kathleen Reynolds with So Charming Quilts and Diane Martin, who is my bestie on the quilting side here. Well, we are working on, don't show them, not yet.
Surprise.
We are working on a pattern it's not our pattern, it's someone else's pattern, it's a free pattern. We're working on this quilt pattern for the next month for our March project, and occasionally things don't quite go according to plan. So we're here to give you a little bit of help and a little bit of what we've discovered doing this. Not that it's our first time discovering this, it's just good things to know. For example, if you're testing out a new pattern, typos can happen. Quilt math mistakes can happen. Never use your best fabric to test certain elements out in a quilt, like a block, or like for flying geese, or specialized half square triangles, or 60-degree triangle squares, and things that may not go according to plan. Always use your scraps. That's the beauty of having scraps and a scrap bucket for that. You can take fabrics that are not necessarily in big usable pieces, but you can test them for these smaller elements to see what's going to work and what's not. Here is a prime example. Diane.
So my pattern called for a 6 1/4 inch base square for my flying geese, and then
Okay, talk to the camera.
the 2 3 7/8 inch squares for the where you put it in the corners.
And they were doing a 4 at a time method for flying geese, which is very simple and it's quick and easy, and it's actually fabric efficient when the math is right. So
I constructed the flying geese, and if you know how to do the 4 at a time method, it's you have your square and you put the 2 squares in the corner, you draw your line down the center, and you sew a scant 1/4 of an inch from your drawn line. You cut it in half, you iron your flaps back, you add your second square in the corner,
the other corner,
so 1/4 of an inch from your drawn lines, cut them apart and iron them.
And this is what you typically get. You get a flying geese. Okay, I'm going to put it up here. You get a flying geese where you have your first seam and then your second seam. But here's where the fun about the math gets in. Or maybe not the fun about the math gets in. These are scraps of ours that we used. If these squares that you cut and do it this way are too big, this is what can happen.
You end
up with a little flap right here. You can see it right there in the corner. And it doesn't happen because you're doing 4 at a time. It only happens on 2 of your squares. You get a little flap here. And you might say, well, when it's sewn into a block, half of that flap is going to disappear if you get your seams right. Yes, but you still have this right here. And it doesn't look right. So, here we're going to talk about the math. So, here is the formula for doing flying geese 4 at a time. Your finished size, that would be the size that it's going to finish to. You're supposed to add 7/8 of an inch to the height and 1 1/4 inches to the width. So, for example, if your if your flying geese finished is going to be 2.5 by 5.5.
No, 2.5 by 5.
Oh, 2.5 by 5.
2.5 by 5.
I'm wrong. 2.5 by 5. Then you want to cut the height, the finished height, at
3 3/8.
3 and no, that's what we did.
Oh,
But typically it's 3 and 7/8. Isn't it? Finished height plus 7/8. That is the
yes, finished height plus 7/8. Yes.
Okay.
You're right.
That's the formula. 7/8 inch added to the finished height of your block, and 1 1/4 inches to the width of your block. So if our finished height is supposed to be 2.5 by 5, then our squares should be
3 3/8. You're going to cut 4 of those.
again, Diane. We're not talking about what we did. We're talking about the finished, what they would normally cut it to, 3 7/8. No, you're wrong. I'm wrong. You messed me up. I know my quilt math and you're messing me up. You're 3 3/8. Let me try this again. Oh gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this live. I do know my quilt math. Let's just say, for example, okay, if your quilt block, your flying geese, are supposed to measure out, we're going to throw different numbers on this now, 3 by 6, you would cut your height 3 7/8 by 7 1/4 to get the correct measurements for that. They wanted us to cut our blocks. Our blocks are supposed to finish at 2.5 by 5. But they wanted us in the instructions to cut the blocks at 3 7/8.
3 7/8.
3 7/8 by 6 1/4. So that's a little too big. And being a little too big, we ended up with that lovely little flap. These squares are too big. Now, so we did a little bit of quilt math for it. Now you could use something like that, which is your flying geese ruler. There's a bunch of them out there that would give you the measurements right up here on the ruler as to whatever you wanted to, size you wanted to finish it, what to cut for the main square, and then what to cut the smaller squares to do the 4 at a time. And then you would trim it a little bit. You could do that, or we can do the quilt math. So this was our first attempt. As you can see, no more flaps. But out of 4 flying geese, there was only that for waste. Now, that is really fabric efficient. However, if your pressing and your stitching is not real accurate, your flying geese are not going to be the right size that you need. Because there's needing to trim a lot is always a good idea. But out of our 4 that we did, 1 didn't quite come to the measurement, which could be a pressing error, a stitching error, or just a measurement in the trimming too. So that was our 3 3/8 by 6 1/4. So we had a little bit extra to trim down, but in some spots, at least on 1 flying geese, we did not have enough. So that's where the next test subject came in. We added a little bit more. We added 3 5/8.
3 5/8.
3 5/8 by 6 1/2.
6 1/2.
And that also was relatively efficient. But again, none of ours had any flaps, so that was easier to do. It was much better. And it was still pretty fabric efficient. I mean, this is all that got trimmed off of that. That's not very much. And that's better to be fabric efficient, because then you're not wasting all of the fabric that you have doing lots and lots of trimming. So this was good. The other thing, what was that? There was something else I was going to tell them. You want to test these on your scraps first.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, it's really important, because then once you get the measurements correct by going up 1/8 of an inch and just trimming a little bit so you get your trims correct, or if you find, we did this 3 times. 3 times we did this
3 times a
to
trim.
make
There's
sure to get the right measurements. It's really important. Don't use your best fabric for it. Get the measurements down perfectly and the technique down, and then do it. And then you'll be golden when you do your stuff. But read through your pattern and do the test on some of these blocks, because sometimes, you know, it's not a perfect world. We want it to be in our quilty world, but sometimes it's just not a perfect world. So read your patterns thoroughly, test some of these blocks, and then when you get it, make your notes on your pattern so that you know next time, or when you're doing 50,000 flying geese, you won't be like wanting to, you know, like
Commit Harry Carey.
yeah, pretty much. So this was our little tip and trick for the day for flying geese if you ever have any troubles. We hope that you will watch our page and enjoy the camaraderie in the group whenever anybody talks to each other. And quilt, and visit us again at So Charming Quilts.
And join us for our monthly quilts. We're doing our
monthly project, which I will give you sneak peekage. Our February quilt has been quilted and bound. It is all done. It's going to hang up in our studio today. Yay. So we have this on our site and in our newsletter. We do a project on, I think it's on, we put it up on YouTube. Our projects are monthly projects. We have more that we're doing, and like most people, we have like an entire list of all the quilts we really want to get to, but don't always get to. Anyway, join us again, and thank you for stopping by.
Thanks. Have a great day.